A month ago, I released my first set of rankings, and let's just say some things have changed. Plain and simple, we're here today to look at my updated rankings, see what's changed and why it's changed, right? But before we get into that, if you enjoy the channel at any point, please support us down below. We're on the road to 500 big ones, 500 subscribers on the channel. So if you just like the video, subscribe, share it, it all goes a very long way, and we can't get to that next milestone without you guys. So we appreciate any and all support, and without further ado, let's get into these updated rankings. And we're going to move over here, and on your screen now, I'll leave it up there for about 5 to 10 seconds, but you can see my old set of rankings. And while these are up, I'm going to explain this to you guys. So you're going to see a lot of shuffling around, like a lot of guys who move up 1 or 2 spots, a lot of guys who drop 1 or 2 spots. It's not the biggest deal, right? Don't go and complain about, hey, this is my favorite quarterback or my favorite receiver, and they drop 2 spots, right? This is not an overall talent thing. Let's keep in mind this is for fantasy football. But as you see my rankings, we're going to move now to the updated ones. And on the right side of your screen, we're going to go through 11 through 20. The guys that have dropped out of my list are Trey Lance and Matthew Stafford. For Trey Lance, all signs as of right now point to Brock Purdy being the starter in the San Francisco offense. And I want a piece of that offense, right? We'll get into that here more in a little bit with Brock Purdy. But for Matthew Stafford, he dropped out simply because when you get to that 16 to 20 range, right, especially at the quarterback position, in fantasy football, we're typically talking about backups, right, or third strings, right, for your fantasy football teams. And when it gets to that point, I'd rather go with guys that have more upside, like an Anthony Richardson, right, like a Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, guys that could explode and be a quarterback one for you. And I don't doubt that Stafford could be a spot start guy, right, week to week. He could be a guy you can rely on. I just, in fantasy drafts, I'd rather go with the upside, right, and pick up Stafford along the way. But moving over to my guys that I've added, it's Brock Purdy and Anthony Richardson. Brock Purdy's at my number 20 spot, and he's set to be the quarterback for the San Fran offense that has tons of weapons, and they're set to score tons of points and win a lot of games, right? So I want a part of that as he's going to be a winner this year. At least we think, and he could explode. He could improve off of last year for all we know. For Anthony Richardson, maybe it's because he's a Gator, right? I don't know, but this offense to me projects to be down a lot of their games. As you saw yesterday's video, we had them as a bottom 5 team here in 2023. But I believe they're going to be down a lot in games, and that's going to lead to a lot of passing upside for Anthony Richardson. That's going to lead to a lot of rushing upside with the backed off coverage late in games for Anthony Richardson. You know, even if this offense isn't down a ton like I'm projecting them, it's still going to be an offense that's going to be run-focused when you have Jonathan Taylor, when you have a good O-line, and Anthony Richardson, which as of right now, I believe Richardson's a better runner than a passer, right? So when you have the combination of a good offensive line, Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson, if early in the games, I think they're going to run the ball a lot more, than people might think. It's going to be run-focused offense, and Anthony Richardson is a very dynamic runner. But other than that, you see Daniel Jones jumps up a spot. Dak Prescott drops down 3, as I'm a little bit more worried as we get closer to fantasy football about Dak Prescott. But still, he's at my number 12 spot. He's still a quarterback 1 for us in 2023. Russell Wilson, I've been a believer in him all season. I believe he's going to be a top 12 quarterback for me when the season comes around. But he's at my number 13 spot. Geno Smith jumps up 3, as that offense is now loaded since the last time I looked into it, and he's going to be climbing up my rankings as well. Aaron Rodgers, Jared Goff, they dropped down a couple spots, whatever, right, as it's not that big of a deal. But moving over to my 1 through 10 on the left side of your screen, we see some new additions to the list, right? We see Deshaun Watson go from the right side to the left side of the screen, basically replacing Dak Prescott. Deshaun Watson, look, I'm a Browns fan, and with how he's looked in OTAs and training camp, all the reports say that he's looking maybe better than his Houston version, right? This is an offense that's going to be a lot more pass-focused this year, and I want a part of the Browns offense if it's going to be good. But my rule of thumb as a Browns fan has always been to stay away from Browns players as much as I possibly can. But Tua moves up a spot, as I believe in Tua. Justin Fields moves down 1. Herbert moves up 1. Lawrence down 1. Lamar up 1, right? So, you see a lot of guys shuffling spots, right? And it's not that big of a deal. It's just a preference at the end of the day. But the biggest riser in my quarterback rankings from early May is Geno Smith. He rised up 3 spots. But my biggest dropper is Dak Prescott. who also dropped 3 spots, right? So, I mean, we're going to go through that, and we're going to look at that throughout the entire offseason from where these guys started in my first rankings to where they will end up. But those are my updated quarterbacks. As let's continue on here to the running backs. Again, I'm going to give you 5 to 10 seconds or so to look at what is on your screen. This is my rankings that I had in early May. Another thing I want to point out is you see, for example, with Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor, I had a 3A, 3B situation. I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to get away from the ties, so to speak, as far as receiver positions and just fantasy rankings, right? As far as positional rankings. I wanted to get away from the ties. I wanted to set numbers, and that's going to cause controversy, but it is what it is. But moving over to my 11 through 20 for running backs, the guys that have dropped out are Dalvin Cook, Javonte Williams, and Alvin Kamara. Dalvin Cook, he was cut from the Minnesota Vikings as of last time that we've recorded. He's expected to be on the roster next season, but as of right now, he's not. And to me, I can't rank you if you're not on a team, and I can't evaluate your current situation. For Javonte Williams, there's still optimism to me that he's going to start next season healthy and be ready from day one. But I'm getting a little bit more worried about the passing upside that Samaje Perine will take away from Javonte Williams. And to me, it just came down to I like other running backs just a little bit more, right? I still think Javonte can be a low-end RB2 for us in 2023. For Alvin Kamara, I just prefer other situations a little bit more, right? I'm not the highest on New Orleans offense, but I still respect them. But the guys that I've added to this list are Jahmyr Gibbs, Miles Sanders, and Alexander Mattison. For Alexander Mattison, it's simple. They cut Dalvin Cook. Mattison, they re-signed him to a new deal, so they believe in him, quite obviously. And he is now set to be a 3-down back. All reports say that they intend to use him like Dalvin Cook. So, I mean, when you have that much production coming your way, you're bound to be fantasy relevant. For Miles Sanders, he's at my number 17 spot, making his debut on the list. He's a number one running back in an offense, and there's no real competition there in Carolina, right? He's in an offense also with a rookie quarterback. You guys know what I love to say about rookie quarterbacks. They love to check down, take the quick and efficient throws. Miles Sanders, though he's not known as a receiving back, might get a lot of that production. And then finally, Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not sure why he was not on my original list, right? But Jahmyr Gibbs was drafted with the number 12 pick by Detroit, so the draft capital is there with him. They intend to use him from day one of next season. And right now, there's reports saying that Detroit is experimenting with Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe using him at receiver at sometimes, maybe getting him in some jet sweep actions, using him in a variety of ways to make him fantasy relevant at the end of the day. But regardless, I think at some point he will transition solely to running back, and I think the second half of the year, he will really take over and be the workhorse guy in Detroit, more so than David Montgomery, right? But that is going to do it for the 20 through 11. Let's move over to the top 10. As on the left side of your screen, you see it. We see a couple guys going up 1 spot, 2 spots. But the biggest thing I want to note here is, well, 2 things, right? Bijan Robinson dropped 5 spots, and it's really because he's a rookie at the end of the day, and it's hard to bank on a rookie when you have other guys with solidified roles, right? You don't have to wait till midseason mark for maybe Bijan to have that role, to be a workhorse guy, right? But my top 10 goes as follows. We have CMC, Austin Eckler, and Saquon Barkley. That's the same top 3 I had last time. But Josh Jacobs is now my number 4 back. I think Josh Jacobs is growing on me more and more, and he might even be my number 3 overall running back by the time fantasy comes around. Tony Pollard, he's jumped up 3 spots, a guy that is going to have a lot of passing work, and he's set to be a 3-down back there in Dallas. Nick Chubb's going up a spot. Jonathan Taylor, I will say, did drop 4 spots, which is interesting to note. But at the end of the day, you guys see the rankings. My biggest riser in rankings was Joe Mixon. He was my number 19 before, solely because of the suspension allegations that could have possibly happened. I mean, they still can, but as of right now, there's been no reports about the situation, and I'm going to go based off of what we know right now. What we know right now is Joe Mixon is set to play football, so he rises to my number 15 spot. But my biggest dropper is Ken Walker, a guy at my number 18 spot you see on the right side of your screen. He dropped from my 10 to 18 because this team went out there, they drafted Zach Charbonnet in the second round. So they plan to use Zach Charbonnet from day one, and Ken Walker is going to get a lot of the running work, right? But this offense is too high-powered, hypothetically passing the ball, that I can't see Ken Walker getting more work than last year, if that makes any sense. They have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, they have JSN, Zach Charbonnet, right? Noah Fant is a name to just throw out there. This team has offensive weapons to be an elite passing offense with Geno Smith. How much would they actually lean on Ken Walker outside of the red zone, right? So at that point, you're going to bank on Ken Walker to score a lot of touchdowns, and that's just a risky game to play. For me, I'm just more comfortable in other running backs as of right now. When draft season comes around, I might come to my senses and have them a little bit higher. But moving over to my wide receiver rankings, again, 5 to 10 seconds. I'll let you guys look at it, as these are the rankings, again, I set in early May. But now on the right side of your screen, you see Garrett Wilson drops 2 spots. T. Higgins, Chris Olave, they go up 2 spots. Calvin Ridley jumps up 5 spots. You see a lot of shuffling around, most notably, though, with Deebo Samuel dropping 6 spots and DK dropping 4 spots. So we're going to get into that here in just a little bit. But the guy that we dropped out of this list was DeAndre Hopkins. It's the same argument for Dalvin Cook. I can't rank you if I can't evaluate your situation, right? But simply put, if a guy like DeAndre ends up in Kansas City or ends up in Buffalo or one of these high-powered offenses, he's going to be right back on this list, right? Plain and simple. But as of right now, I can't evaluate you if I don't know your situation. For Jerry Jeudy, I added him to this list simply because Sean Payton is in town. I'm a big believer in Denver, and I believe they can turn it around and really maybe compete for the AFC West here in 2023. But I believe the number 1 wide receiver, it has to be Jerry Jeudy. He's in a contract year with tons to prove, tons of untapped potential. If Russell can bounce back the way I think he can with Sean Payton, I think Jerry Jeudy's going to have a huge year. And he just has to stay healthy right at the end of the day. But moving over to my top 10, as you see, we've added a couple guys, right? We've added Jalen Waddle to the list, and Amon-Ra has jumped up to the number 9 spot. But other than that, we set in stone our 2 through 4, as I had a 2A, 2B, 2C situation with Cooper Kupp, Ja'Marr Chase, and Tyreek Hill. For me, I would prefer in this order, Cooper Kupp, Ja'Marr Chase, Tyreek Hill. That's as of right now. I could wake up tomorrow and want to change it. That's how close those guys are. A.J. Brown jumps up a spot. Amon-Ra and Jalen Waddle jump up a spot, as I have 2 Dolphin receivers in the top 10. Kind of crazy to think about that, right? But my biggest riser on this wide receiver list is Calvin Ridley. And this is a guy that I've been on the hype train since they got him, right? So I'm going to take my flowers with this and say that I had him in my top 20, and now he's a top 15 receiver. I believe in Calvin Ridley that much. He's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in an offense that we expect to take a jump with it, especially being under year 2 with Doug Peterson. Super talented wide receiver, and there will be some rust in the first couple weeks. There's nothing like game shape. There will be some rust, but I believe after that he can explode and really be a league winner here in the 4th or 5th round of your drafts. The biggest dropper in my list is going to be Deebo Samuel. Regardless of the quarterback situation in San Fran, we haven't seen Deebo Samuel be an elite fantasy wide receiver without that rushing work that he got in 2021, where he was the offense for San Francisco, right? Aside from that, I think he's still going to be a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, in 2023. But this offense is projected to be about the same as far as how they operate, and it's hard to imagine a wide receiver 1 finish for Deebo Samuel if it's through the air, right? He's going to have some splash plays. He's going to have some spike weeks where he is that guy through the air. But it's hard to imagine that consistently throughout an entire year, he can be a wide receiver 1 without the rushing upside that we saw just a few years ago. But moving over to my tight end rankings, we're going to close out here as, again, 5 to 10 seconds. Take a good look at the list. On the left side, on the right side, this is the one position that there wasn't a ton of changes, and we'll get into that here now. As you see on the right side of your screen, you see a couple guys jumping up a couple spots, some falling a couple spots. But the guy that fell out of my list was Irv Smith, the tight end for Cincinnati. And he was strictly there because, he has Joe Burrow in one of the best offenses in the league. But Joe Mixon at the time, we didn't know what was going to go on. And if Joe Mixon is going to be suspended, that opens up more targets for a guy like Irv Smith to come in and take some of those targets, be fantasy relevant from a week-to-week basis. But to me, Irv Smith, the potentials aren't going to be there. The targets aren't going to be there if Joe Mixon is back and he's ready to go from day 1. And plus, Samaje Perine is gone, right? So Joe Mixon should get only more passing work here in 2023. I did add Tyler Conklin, though, right? He's the tight end for the New York Jets. He's the tight end in an offense with Aaron Rodgers, which we know Aaron Rodgers loves his tight ends. They should throw a lot, and they should score tons of points. They should be fun to watch. You just have to hope Tyler Conklin can find his way in this offense and maybe find his way into the end zone a couple times to really take the shine away from guys like Garrett Wilson or Breece Hall or other guys. Maybe Tyler Conklin could be the go-to guy here in the red zone. But who knows, right? It's when you're speaking about that low of a tight end, it's all up in the air. And finally here, my 10 through 1, you see Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, TJ Hockenson, George Kittle, Dallas Goedert. That's my same top 5. I might change around Goddard and Kittle, but regardless, it's pretty much going to stay the same this entire offseason. At my number 6 spot, I set Kyle Pitts at 6, Darren Waller at 7. I had those guys tied at 6A and 6B. I set Kyle Pitts there strictly for his upside, and he's a little bit more durable there than Darren Waller. But Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku, Evan Ingram, there's not a lot of changes here in my 10 through 1, but not a lot of changes overall here in my tight end rankings. But regardless, my biggest dropper was Hayden Hurst as he went from 16 to 19, and it's not a big change, right? That 16 to 20 range, you're really just throwing you're throwing blindly at a dartboard, right? Hoping something hits. But to me, I still expect a lot of passing work for him from Bryce Young, and this might be too low, but I believe in other guys a little bit more, right? And one of those guys is Dalton Kincaid. It's a very questionable pick, but I'm hoping Dalton Kincaid looks better than Dawson Knox out of the training camp. And I'm not going to say he necessarily takes away production from Dawson Knox, but maybe he can get some more red zone opportunities, some more creative ways that he gets used in the offense than Dawson Knox, and be more fantasy relevant. Again, I've said it a couple times, that 16 through 20 range, you're kind of throwing blindly at the tight end and quarterback position. And that's why I'm going to throw in flyers like Dalton Kincaid that I might take a shot on in the last round of my draft. But that is going to do it for today's show. Again, I want to do these videos probably once a month, right? Or once every 2 weeks as we get closer to draft season. But it's ultimately just to look at what's happening around the league. What's changing in my mind as we get closer to draft season. As it sucks that my draft mates are going to see these videos and see how I value certain players. But at the end of the day, you still have to draft against me, and that's the hardest part of fantasy football, right? It's the funnest part, but the hardest part. But regardless, that's going to do it. We're on the road to 500 subs on the channel. If you've made it this far, please support us down below. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, share the podcast. It all goes a very long way as we're on the road to another big milestone in 500 subscribers, and we can't get there without you guys, right? So continue to support us. We appreciate any and all support. But until tomorrow with another podcast where we're going to go into the top 25 players under the age of 25. Should be plenty controversy. Should be tons of fun, though. And I'll see you guys then. Stay happy, stay healthy. Another fantasy football episode in the books. We're out.